All right, what's up, everybody? It is 6 days since the NAR settlement changes took place. I've been doing a lot of interviews with top real estate professionals, both practitioners, coaches. I interviewed Tom Ferry last Wednesday. If you are in mortgage or real estate, you didn't watch that interview, I'm telling you, it was gold. I had a number of people reach out saying that was one of their favorite Tom Ferry interviews in a long, long time. And I've known Tom for over 20 years. And before he was Tom Ferry that the industry knew, and the dude just gets better and better and better. So today it is Keri Shull. What is up, Keri?
Hey, I'm excited to be here. I want to watch that interview, by the way. I can't wait.
Yeah, no, I'll make sure I shoot it to you afterwards. I actually, in preparation for this, should have sent it over to you. I just can only imagine how busy you are leading, all the agents that you do, plus being an industry leader. Wanted to make no prep for Keri, just come in and tell us what's going on. So one more framing statement before we get into it. I have interviewed Keri a few times. She was also gracious enough to be at the Modern Real Estate Summit. She's just amazing. The way I had met her, she was introduced to me by Shayla Gifford. And when Shayla says, I know someone that you need to know, that you need to interview, it was just like, I emailed her and said, hey, when can you jump on and create content? And Keri, maybe you know this, but I mean, you are truly one of the hot new leaders in our community. Like, we got so much great feedback from all the interviews that we've done together.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah. So it's 6 days. Well, first of all, remind everybody about your, what you do, the division that you lead, and kind of your model, and then we'll get into questions.
Sure. So I've been coaching real estate agents for 5-6 years. I run a large team in the DMV, so DC, Maryland, and Virginia. And at this point, I think we have about 80 agents. And our hottest year, we did 732 million in volume in a year. And if we fast forward to today, we've really expanded globally. So we have partners now all over the country. We're with EXP, and we have about 600 agents in our groups at EXP. So I'm really focused on right now, post-settlement and always, what are the things that we can do as industry professionals to have peace? I think it's a time where people are in fear. And instead of being in fear, they should be in motion. And so a lot of times when I'm thinking about the settlement, what it really is change. And a lot of what we need to do as professionals is change management within ourselves. So one of the things we were chatting about before we jumped on is I keep hearing from all these coaches and professionals, and add value, add more value, show your value. And I'm already shifting into, well, how? Because I think a lot of people, when their confidence is shaking, it's really, really challenging to step up and evolve and feel that level of confidence. So that's what I've been really focused on with my agents.
Yeah. So just to cap for everybody, she's with EXP. She's got an entire group of 600 agents that she has influence over, and that she is brought into that platform and is trying to give value to a team of 80. What do you think your real estate volume will be for the year? What's the goal?
Definitely going to be down. Our goal is to do 350 transactions.
Okay, cool. So 350 transactions. And then a couple things that I want to get your opinion on before we just get into tactics, because I want to go high level and then go, okay, tactically, how do we deliver value? Because I've been interviewing a lot of people, and I think it's pretty well known, everyone. Agents and mortgage professionals need to do a better job of articulating their unique value. And if you're a mortgage professional, talking about how you close loans on time, how you close loans smooth, how you give great communication, that's expected. That's a table stake. If you're a buyer's agent and you're talking about how you're a local market expert, how you have great negotiation skills, that you have this great group of partners that will help the consumer, like, those are table stakes. Those are not new things. And so I want to articulate that. But before we do that, What percentage of offers, and let's go short term, long
Yeah.
term, and let's say long term's a year from now, and let's say short term between now and the end of the year, what percentage of offers that a buyer agent makes, they're going to be blind to whether the seller is going to pay for the buyer's agent commission or how much, where they're just going to literally be writing an offer and like, we don't know. What is
You
your
know
take
what
on
I
that?
think about that, Dave? I don't think there's an average answer that is consistent across different markets, because I think in some pockets, sellers are going to be nervous about selling their homes, right? And so it's going to be easier in those situations to always offer compensation, because the seller's going to look and go, wow, the absorption rate does not match the inventory, and I need to be able to provide some certainty so more people are going to buy the home. If they have a smart listing agent, right, that is able to articulate why it's advantageous to put their cards on the table and share that they're offering compensation. So I think it's going to vary wildly in different pockets of the market with different levels of sophistication. What I'll tell you is I'm in one of the most educated markets in the country here in the DMV, right? And leading into it, everyone was saying, these are people who, read the newspaper and watch the news, and they're going to be pushing back and they're not going to want to pay compensation. And 6 days in, that's not what we've experienced. We didn't have any pushback with the listings that we had that were active where anyone said, oh, this magic date came and now I don't want to work with buyer's agents. That's just not been our experience thus far. And when I'm talking to teams that I'm coaching around the country, I had a session yesterday with Gretchen Coley, who's one of the top agents at Compass, and we were coaching our agents on how to actually overcome the real objections. The funny part is everyone wanted to get together to talk about the settlement, and we're like, let's talk about the standard objections that you need to get good at. How do you price the home correctly, right? How do you, all of these things that we always talk about are what really is fundamentally what's important, and how you're laying the foundation to have the impact be less and the uncertainty be less. So for both of us, we're getting buyer agent commission, and we are disclosing it up front when agents are calling. So there's this other philosophy of not disclosing what the compensation will be, but the way that I look at it, you're disclosing what the compensation will be based on the asking price. So why wouldn't you be doing that? And commission will be negotiable like everything else in the transaction.
Yeah. And I can't argue with that. I've interviewed a lot of folks and I'm hearing different opinions on that, but I can think of no debate that it will be local. And also it will be not just local, like if a house is going to get multiple offers and it's priced really competitive, that might be one way to play it. And two doors down, it's priced differently and it's not getting any offers and it's been sitting there for 2 months. There may be a different way to play that house. So that makes perfect sense to me. What about this? The other thing I'm hearing consistently without debate, and I want to hear your take, is that open houses are going to become a bigger battlefield and a bigger opportunity. Maybe there will be more open houses and maybe there will be more consumers coming through those open houses. Any opinions on that?
Oh, I have a lot of opinions on that. So I don't know if you know this about me, but I started my career selling new homes, and then I sold condo buildings for developers. And so my life was an open house. And I have a lot of training that I do for industry professionals on how to dominate opens. It
Ooh,
is
dominate opens. Let's go.
yeah, it is my strong opinion. Like when agents tell me, oh, open houses are a waste of time, it makes my head want to explode, right? And this makes me sound old, but back in the day, when I was doing opens, people were coming to the house based on signs. They did not know the price point. They didn't know the beds and baths. They didn't know all of these things. If somebody gets up out of their chair in their home, they schlepp their kids, they know, they've already looked on Zillow, they know the price point, they've seen the kitchen, they've identified the beds and baths, they know how big it is, they know where it's located. So if you don't take that opportunity seriously and work to elevate your skill so that you can sell the house you're in, that is a huge mistake. And it's also my opinion that a lot of agents, the way they approach opens is just wrong. So one of the things I teach is dramatic demonstration. You can't stand in the kitchen of a house and say, So would you think you're going to sell it? That is just very not the appropriate way to handle an open if you want to be successful in selling it. So I think it will
Would
be a
you call
bigger
that,
battle.
did you call that dramatic demonstration? What did you call it?
Yes.
I love
Dramatic
that.
demonstration. Because what I would do when I was selling new homes, first of all, sometimes I was selling homes like in a trailer in a field. And if that person left, I was alone all day, right? So I was like, we're going to talk about it all. We're going to visualize it all. We're going to figure out how to make this your perfect property and what are the deeper needs that someone has. So I think often real estate agents and lenders too, really, they don't get to the emotion behind the need. Why? What's the impact that it's going to have on somebody's life? And when you really drive all the way there, it can change the way somebody's looking at the challenges they see in their head because they're looking at it from one perspective. When you, as the professional, really understand their deeper needs, you can solve them in ways that the client hasn't thought of yet. And that can be very impactful for open houses. When I'm training agents, they say, the client gives one objection and they start moving on to selling them something else. But in reality, they need to understand the deeper reasons that the client is feeling that way so they can problem solve. The other thing that's a big difference, I had a lot of controversial and polarizing thoughts when the policies around coming soon started to change. So when I say that, does that resonate with you? Do you know why that was so upsetting to me?
No.
Okay. So about 30% of my business was done off market. I love marketing, right? I'm a really aggressive marketer. And so I would take a seller that said, Keri, we're moving to California in a year. And I would sign that listing all day long. And I would explain to them, the best case scenario is me identifying the right buyer for you 6 months before you want to move. Then you can start looking at homes. You can sleep peacefully at night. You know that you're going to get money in your bank account 90 days before you move. So you can go buy another home and you have the flexibility to negotiate the best terms for the person on the other side, right? But then the coming soon policy changed. So all of a sudden, they locally, and it might not be this way in every market, but in most markets, the change happened where the listing agent could no longer advertise the listing because they wanted you to have to cooperate within the MLS. So the reason that this is so impactful is because as of the settlement date, those rules go away because now I'm allowed to market properties to be able to do the best job for my client, the seller, to bring in buyers myself. Well, the industry tried to change that with all these policies on how you could advertise coming soon. And in a moment, that changed. So I'm really excited about that. And anyone who's watching this, let's imagine you're a lender starting to come up with some innovative strategies for how to pair. Let's imagine you have a listing. You're really thinking creatively and brainstorming with your client on who's that right buyer avatar and how can you go get that avatar? How can you actually sell your own listing? So that's one of the ways that we've been very, very successful in our market. And now we have that tool back at our disposal.
And I have to imagine that is one of your tactics to create value. I mean, that is a massive strategy that differentiates you, that is unique value. If I was a seller in your market or a buyer in their market, that would be a pillar. Fair to say?
It's huge. Yeah. And one of the things I teach our sellers, so imagine for a minute, if you have agents that want more listings, I think we can agree that everyone is in that category right now because they like the certainty that comes with listings, right? What I would explain to the seller is, listen, the agents that you hire that tell you their amazing marketing plan, right? They're most of the time going to be marketing, and the people that they're marketing to are not going to be ready yet to buy a home. They're going to be ready if they're starting to engage with marketing 6 to 12 months from now. That's what we find most frequently with online marketing strategies, right? And so what I would explain is, and this depends on the agents that you guys are talking to as lenders, and if you're watching this, you want to hire the agent that already has a database of buyers in waiting. People who have been marketing on your behalf before you ever hire them. So for the agents that really dominate a local market and are doing a lot of advertising, that's how we've described it as, listen, we started spending money 6 months ago, a year ago, to identify the buyer that's going to buy your house. And now it's our job to go through our database, to call all of those people and to find the right people who are the right avatar to buy your house.
Yeah. Are you familiar with Ken DeLeon in the Silicon Valley market?
I'm not, no.
I interviewed him a few weeks ago. His group, his team is going to do about $1 billion this year. And he's at a
Fabulous.
high amount, but he's probably the biggest buyer agent in America. Anyways, he had some very unique ways of creating, unique value. And when he gave me the playbook on his open house, like the Ken DeLeon open house, it was pretty wild. So here's what I'd love to do if you're cool with this. And I would really like to unpack what I call a pillar of value and how you tell that story. And then anything else that you think is unique or, let's get tactical. But I want to get tactical on open houses. So if you could just kind of riff on, what would be the checklist for Keri Shull open house?
Open house?
Yeah. Like would you call it
to dominate?
Dominate open houses and the dramatic demonstration. So like, what is the checklist of skills and things that a realtor and a loan professional would do? Because we're also coaching our mortgage professionals on how to be more valuable at open houses. So I want to hear what you do, and then I want to insert a couple ideas.
Sure. Okay, that would be amazing. So the first thing I would say, how you prepare matters. So a lot of my agents feel like they need to know everything around the open house really well. Well, I had an Army Corps of Engineers account when I first started. So I was covering Baltimore to Richmond. I did not, most of the time I was showing up and I'd never been in the neighborhood before, right? So whether the open house that you're doing is in an area where you know everything or not, it actually doesn't matter. What matters is how you prepare. So for us, we want to understand all of the homes that have sold in the area recently. That's very obvious, right? You want to study the details of that, study the features, because when you're trying to help somebody craft an offer, that's assuming you're going to get to the point, by the way, that you're writing an offer for the house you're sitting in. So you have to understand the comps really, really well in order to be positioned to be the expert when you're presenting that to the client. The other thing that we talk about is all of the active inventory, the coming soon inventory. I always study the absorption rate because I want to understand how quickly inventory is getting scooped up, whether that's for the positive or the negative. But in some pockets of our market, everything is still moving really, really fast, right? In other pockets, it's not. And so how you would position the conversation with the buyer and how you would choose to create urgency is really important. I was sharing with someone on my team yesterday when I was selling new buildings, trying to create urgency, right? If you have 14 units that are identical and you have a total of 400 units, there are still a lot of strategies to create unique value with each individual place. So creating a oneness and why somebody wants something. When you think about it, if you're in a custom home or you're in a property that was built 30 years ago and it's been renovated, it's one of a kind. That's the easiest time to create unique value when you're at the open. But if you don't understand every single detail, it's very hard to close. So let me give you an example. If somebody's objection to the property you're in is, well, I really like this house, but we want a bigger backyard. You have to have done your research up front to understand all of the properties that are in the same pocket, how many of them actually have a larger yard? Well, if none of them have a larger yard, then you know that your challenge in that moment is not convincing the person that none of them have a larger yard. It's getting them to sit down to review other options because that's an easy segue. And then when you're doing that, you simply display the sold comps and say to them, let me ask you something. With this yard, you get X, Y, and Z that you wanted. So we'll talk a little bit about the process we use of gathering all the information and how I would approach that. But a lot of it is presenting data. And it's the same for us on the buy side. We use the reality check analysis process, which I've talked to you about, but I'll talk a little bit about later. if you're trying to sell the listing and you don't have the right technology to present the data, that's a huge mistake. I think you always need a laptop. And I also believe you always need an iPad at every open house. Why? Well,
Yes.
I use an iPad because I have our presentation on the iPad, and I'm able to go ahead and go through and answer all of the questions and make sure that the person has confidence that they know what to expect. The further emotionally you can move someone through the process, the more likely it is that they're going to buy. So to me, if somebody says, well, this is my first time out, fantastic. One of the things I'll say to them is, well, maybe your first time looking at homes, but my guess is you've been looking on Zillow for a while, right? Yes. Okay. So we'll go through and say, it's different for people today because they've done so much research before they ever go out and see homes. It's not uncommon for people to know exactly what they're looking for. And you came to see this home because of X, Y, and Z. That's why it probably is a good idea for us to sit down and discuss the next steps so you're really prepared, right? Yes. Then you can go through the data. Then you can give them the confidence. Then you can get them to buy that home.
Love that. Yeah, one of the things that I'm hearing a lot from the mortgage coaches out there is more providing a digital open house experience around finance strategies to make the house more affordable.
Oh, yeah.
And you're seeing a lot of agents, use that, whether they have it on an iPad, whether they're streaming it on Apple TV so that it's on the screen in a house, but using that to just, again, being valuable is helping families be excited about buying the house, showing them how they're going to build wealth with real estate over time. So we're seeing a lot of mortgage coaches provide, like I interviewed a guy who was on a family vacation, but he had 15 different open houses that he was supporting with a mortgage coach experience. And he said, hey, we print up some of them, we provide some of them digitally, but and it's not like the realtor's open house flyer. It's finance strategies to package that house for sale. Any
Which
thoughts
is,
on that?
oh my gosh, it's such an incredible part. So this is when we're talking about walking people down the emotional path. I think part of the preparation is understanding what are the payment options, talking to a trusted lender. And for some of our opens, we'll encourage our lender partners to come with us and be a part of it, but they can't be everywhere at one time, right? So for some of them, we've just done the research in advance. And one of the strategies, which I know this is built into your program, right? One of the things that makes people move when they're in a place of hesitation is pain and fear, right?
Mm-hmm.
So one of the ways we push the pain button, I will ask someone, so can you share with me, it sounds like you mentioned you're renting right now. How long have you guys been renting in the area? 7 years. Okay. And what are you paying on average in rent right now? $2,000. Don't do the math for 1 year, do the math for 7 years. And then you go, oh my gosh, this is awful. And guess what? We're not talking about, you're in this point of decision and you're hesitating a little bit about whether you're ready to buy right now, aren't you? Yeah, a little bit. That's why we've been dabbling for 6 months, right? So you need to set the table at the open to help the fact that they've been dabbling be more painful. So if you only look at what they've spent in rent for the last 6 months, that's just not painful enough. You have to future pace if they kept that hesitation going as long as they've had it happen in the past, what that means on a massive scale. And if you don't come prepared with all the financial information, you're not going to have the tools in your toolbox to make it so painful that they get a conviction to commit.
So I want to share, I've seen mortgage coaches do this before where they'll show rent, or use our rent versus own analysis, and column A is renting that amount. Then they'll actually do a cost of waiting. Like, oh, you did that for 7 years. Like you could have bought a house 7 years ago for blank. Let's see what that looks like. Column B is, let's just say 3 more years from now, like 10 years. And so literally you could show them like, this is what it's cost you. This is what you paid. This is what your net worth could be 7 years. And then you could do 10 years. And in 10 years, this is what it could be. So like, one, there's a little bit of pain because you're showing them what they.
Oh, it's not a little. It's like,
no,
oh,
you're right. But then you're also showing, but it's not too late. Like, And we can make that 10 years, 15 years. So it's like, get in the game, you know? And so for anyone listening to this, a cost of waiting analysis, and that's kind of the rent versus own cost and waiting analysis. It also works for a move up where you can say, hey, column A is this is what you have based on appreciation rates. If you just stay where you're at, this is what it looks like. Column B or C, this is the move up. You know, let's say it's 20%, 30% more home. So they can see the net worth increase. So by the way, that's another thing. Who was it that told me? I had dinner with Phil M. Jones, the author of Exactly What to Say. And he was making a case that both realtors and mortgage professionals need to start projecting 5 years. Like, what is the 5-year benefit? Stop focusing on 3 months in the transaction.
Oh, I
5
couldn't
months in the
agree
transaction.
more.
Start focusing on 5 years. What's this mean to you over 5 years?
So I've always done it over 10 years. Like how I just said, hey, how many years have you been renting? I know the average person in our area is going to say 7 years, 8 years, 10 years. Like it's crazy. When I was younger, it was 3 years, right? So that people are choosing to wait longer.
Yeah, no, you're right. 10 years is
buy right
probably the
now.
right number. Yeah.
Yeah. But when I would show them what the opportunity would do for them, I always did the math by hand because I didn't have your tools in my toolbox, right? But I would have them calculate it with me. And then they would, when they're looking at it, okay, we would go back and pull comps. So just for a minute, if you're an agent and you're trying to have impact on someone, one of the things I've found when you help them fully digest the numbers, I'm not a numbers person. So that actually works to my advantage because I break it down to make sure they're really with me and we do it as a team. So when you're co-creating the information, they believe it more, right? So we would take out a piece of paper and like year 1, year 2, year 3, and we would look at the comps from 10 years ago that were identical to the comps that we just pulled for the property. And then you can easily say, okay, here's all the same criteria. All you do in your MLS is hit that stats button. That's going to tell you what the average price of that exact asset was 10 years ago. Okay. Then you just look at the percentage year over year, the increase, and you apply that and you calculate the percentage increase and make sure you don't just multiply it by 10, right? Because it's compounding. So I would have the client use their little calculator and help me calculate it on a piece of paper so that they're like, oh my gosh, really? Could that really be what my equity is? Well, if history repeats itself, yes, absolutely. And that doesn't factor how much you're going to pay down in principal over the next 10 years, which right now, then people argue about the interest rate. Guys, you can completely take that objection away by simply helping them understand that with rent, they're paying 100% interest, right? Like the interest rate is irrelevant when you factor in they're going to pay principal down. They're going to have appreciation. They're going to have tax advantages. They have all of these things, and they have an environment that they control.
So I want everybody to write this down, and I want you to kind of audit yourself. The word co-create. There's so much power, and I catch mortgage coaches doing this all the time where when they're putting together the total cost analysis of the rent versus own, they just put in an appreciation rate. Like, oh, I'm going to put in 4%, and I'm going to, put in an asset accumulation. The average is 8%. So important, guys, that when you do this, you're co-creating with the client. And you're not leading them. You're asking them like, hey, what do you think appreciation rate is going to be? Now, if they need help them. Well, this is what it has been, and give them some data. But when you co-create that data, and then they see it, authorship is ownership. They own it. And now it means something. But if you just create it for them, and now you're kind of selling them a strategy, it does not have the same value. And so as a mortgage professional, I think this is something that you can bring value to agents with right now, because most agents aren't numbers people. They're helping people emotionally get connected to a house. They're helping them with lifestyle. I do love, Keri, that you're so data-driven, so you are, and I think there are a lot of very successful real estate professionals that are data-driven now. Like the data-driven real estate advisor is really the most successful agent, I think, in the market, the most effective. But you need a mortgage partner that can kind of vision cast the wealth creation along with the mortgage, right? Like that's value for you.
Oh my gosh, we partner so closely with our lenders because some of the principles in helping someone understand are really complex, right? So for me, I have to be able to have a partner. I'm not in my meetings. So let's shift to the buy side for a minute, because I think post settlement, that's where a lot of the fear is. So when I've been focused on the tactics to lessen the fear and the process to lessen the fear, there's some things we've talked about before. But one of the things I realized, and I'll just briefly summarize the reality check analysis because it's a segue. And if you guys are watching this and you haven't seen any interviews Dave and I have done before, I want to encourage you to watch.
They'll be down below. There'll be a link down below. And they're extraordinary. Some of the most successful, most watched interviews I've done this year. If you're watching this on YouTube, in the show notes, we'll have links to them.
Okay, amazing. So the one that we did on the reality check analysis, the quick philosophy here is before you go out and show homes, you want to have a very clear process with the client when you meet them. So let's imagine there's 3 steps to the process. The first step in the process is really understanding their motivation, understanding all of the things that are important to them in a home. And remember what I said earlier, the why and the emotional impact to the client of having that happen or not happen, right? So imagine going really deep in that section 1. That's going to give you everything you need to be successful at the end of the transaction, right? But then, or at the end of the appointment too. So then there's section 2. For us, we have a really firm presentation that we go through. And when I say firm, I mean, it's fixed. Everyone on our team doesn't have a different presentation. They have the same presentation. And every client, you need to understand what they need to know how to present that in a way that's valuable to them. So we use the same presentation, whether it's a first-time home buyer or it's a buyer that has bought 15 homes and relocated all over the country, because we think the principles we need to talk through are the same, just the pace in which we do it and how deep we go is a little different, okay? So let's imagine that goes really well. In my mind, what a buyer wants is consistent. They want the right house and they want to feel like they got a good deal. I think that's consistent. So if everyone that you're talking to, you imagine that's the case, we go really deep. Like we talked about the table stakes, right? We would go really deep into our ability to generate off-market opportunities for our clients. To be able to have the swagger and confidence to do that and get the client to commit and feel confident that they're making the right decision, we have 17 different strategies for how we find off-market properties for our clients. And when I'm coaching real estate teams, guess what's the #1 slide they want to take out of the presentation? That they are willing to find off-market properties, because they say, well, I don't have access to the same off-market properties that you do, Keri, so I can't commit to that. Like, no, you can. Anyone can. I don't care if it's your first day as a real estate agent. From my perspective, that's the unique value that we can provide our clients that's not par for the course saying, I'm a great negotiator. What real estate agent sits at the presentation and says, hey, I'm not that great at negotiation, but I'm a nice person? No one. So everybody's saying the same thing. So how do you truly differentiate what you bring to the table when you are willing to go out and door knock and you're willing to harvest data about when leases are expiring, which, by the way, guys, is free and on your MLS. It's not hard. You can then really provide additional value. And so for us, we have all these different strategies on how we do that consistently for our clients. And then you have to put in the work and you have to deliver, right? But once you do that, then it's how do you know that you're investing your time wisely to find the right off-market properties? So this is the biggest mistake I see agents make. If I'm the agent and I say, yes, I'm going to find off markets for you, but I haven't identified if what someone wants exists in the market in the initial meeting, I'm not going to be able to deliver on my commitment because I haven't narrowed the focus enough to be successful in the time and money that I'm spending generating the result, right? So here's how we approach it. This is the reality check. And then I'm going to talk about the piece that I discovered was missing from our internal process, Dave. The reality check is studying the last 90 days of data. Okay. So if you study the last 90 days of data and there's nothing the client would have bought, you know you're never going to find off markets because people aren't selling their homes at the price that someone wants to pay for what they want to pay. So similar to a seller, a buyer wants a house, but typically they want to pay less than his market value for the house. They want features that don't actually exist. They want a bigger backyard than exists, right? And so part of an excellent agent is learning how to listen to all of the priorities of the client and then match what is realistic in the market to the client, right? So we have something we use called the circle of truth, and it's essentially just a way of gently getting the client to analyze 4 different data pieces: the location, the price, the type of home, and the features. So if you're getting the client to go deep into those things, and we call it stacking, where you stack the priorities and you ask them, you know, Dave, if you had to choose between being in the location in Clarendon, which I know you said was important because of the Whole Foods and you wanting to be able to walk to your favorite gym, and buying a townhome versus a single family to keep you in your budget, would you choose to go a little outside of Clarendon and go with a single family, or would you want a townhome right in the heart of Clarendon?
Love it. I want to be next to the gym.
Okay, cool. So what it does is takes their competing priorities and helps you to stack them. So then you know how to approach their search with how they would choose in mind. So when I just did that, it seems silly, but how you say what you say matters, right? So what I did is reinforce that I heard why his priorities were important to him. I know the why behind the why, and I'm asking which one is more important. That enables you to very quickly shift their focus so you can broaden the inventory if nothing exists right now. So let's future pace this. Let's imagine Dave picked 3 properties that are exactly what he's looking for. Here's the magic in this. When I click those properties and I hit stats, I'm going to be able to very quickly identify how he needs to structure a future offer, because I'm looking at the exact properties he would have bought. So here's a mistake that I see buyer agents make all the time, and it costs them a ton of money. They don't do this exercise up front, and let's imagine they end up finding the perfect home. When they pull the stats to be able to identify how the buyer should think about crafting their offer, the buyer's looking at all the properties they never would have bought because the kitchen's a disaster. It's next to a huge bus stop or whatever it is, whatever the drawback is, they can't be logical at that time because they're too nervous about making the offer. So then they make an offer too low because they're not looking at comps that are the most similar to what they're buying. They get their heels dug in on, well, that property that's right down the street is 700,000, so I want to offer 700. Well, wait a minute. We ruled this out up front. These are the 3 that we need to focus on. So just by doing this exercise up front and getting all the way to the piece where you hit stats, you can then say, hey, with properties that are similar to what you're going to want to buy, Dave, these 3 properties are most similar. The average days on market for these 3 was 7. And that was actually driven up by the property that had the offer deadline right here. So had the agent not had the offer deadline, these would have went in 2 to 3 days. So we need to be really on top of it when we're looking for homes. So what you're doing is setting expectations right in that moment from a tactical perspective. If you don't have those conversations, here's what happens. Hey, Dave, I found this perfect property. I'd love you to come see it. And Dave says, great, let's go this weekend. Well, it's a Tuesday. The property's going to be gone by the weekend. But if you haven't framed the client's expectations, you're going to end up losing over and over again. And the client's going to get really frustrated. And that didn't have to happen. So one of the core philosophies that I've had recently, when I've really been trying to dig deep with my agents, is how you handle it right after the appointment. That matters so much. Because if you're an agent that is really good at what you do, you connect deeply with the client, you learn all of their needs, you do all of those things right. What I'm hearing in frustration from a lot of agents is, Keri, I did it all right. They signed the agreement, but I can't get them out to see any houses. If that's the problem, then you know the reality check is just not, it's not landing correctly. And then what you do with it isn't landing correctly from there. So the next piece I haven't actually taught, even to my own team. I have this training scheduled, but I realized something that I did every single time when I met with a client, I haven't trained people on effectively. So here's how it works. If you imagine that you've just done the reality check, you've identified what your client is willing to compromise and what they're not, you're going to save up an automated search. Okay. That's going to go directly in their inbox and you're going to be CC'd on it anytime a property hits the market. But the second piece of this is what matters the most. All of those 4 quadrants where they weren't wanting exact, right? For the features, they were still saying they had to have a 2-car garage. Well, what if a 2-car garage could be built? Your job as the agent is to expand inventory so you have more likelihood of closing more deals, right? So what I would do in that initial meeting, I would save the automated search and it would be exactly what would come to both of us. And then my communication pattern, I would assume, hey, I want to make sure that the client and I are communicating about all of these properties. So if something that hit would come into my inbox in the morning, I would be texting the client and saying, hey, 123 Main Street, it doesn't have the open kitchen that I know is important to you. And I know that's a deal breaker because you don't want to do any work. So didn't want you to invest too much time looking at that one. Talk to you soon. I would tell them why they shouldn't see it. So when I said, hey, we need to go see 123 Main Street, it's perfect, 9 a.m. or noon, what's better for you? I was able to get them to go see that property immediately because I was constantly saving them time and communicating with them. But what's more important is after they leave that day, when you've set up that automated search, you need to set up searches for the other 4 things that are slightly off. This is the piece I wasn't teaching, and it's a game changer for any agent. So if you're a lender listening to this, and you teach your agents to do this, I swear to you, they will sell more homes. Because if you say, okay, the client said, I will only buy a home with a 2-car garage, and all you show them are the properties that have 2-car garages, you're missing out on the ones that could have a detached 2-car garage that could be a perfect fit and everything else they wanted. And if you as the agent don't set that search in the moment, right after your clients leave that day to come automatically only to you, you're not going to present those options. You're going to get busy because you're prospecting, you have other clients that you're following up with. So simply by taking the 4 quadrants, the price, how many times do you have a client that's fixed on a budget and then they start looking around and they change their budget? Well, the problem is, if you start sending them properties automatically that are over their budget, which I hear agents do that all the time, they think you didn't listen and they get really frustrated with you. But if I know the client can qualify up to $1 million, but they've set a budget of $750 and something comes in at $850, I can watch that. I can send them a message that says something like this. Hey, I recognize that you guys are really committed to staying in a budget where your monthly payment is X, and this property would add an additional $600 to your monthly payment. But what I noticed is it combines X, Y, and Z need that you have. And so it may be worth at least taking a look so we can watch it and see if we have the opportunity to negotiate. Would you guys like to see it this afternoon, or would this evening be better? Then all of a sudden, you're staying in touch with them with inventory that's just outside what they told you. And you don't have to waste time studying that all the time. So the other trick is, like, let's imagine they want a specific location. When you're setting up the search for yourself that's a little broader, you black out the location that they set. Now, this is so in the weeds, but I promise if you don't do it this way, you'll never take the time to study the emails that are coming into your inbox that are only to you so you can present those options to them. So when I was when I was working with buyers, I labeled it exactly so that when I saw the email come in, I would know Justin and Kate, no garage. And so then I would be able to know exactly what was the missing link. So when I emailed the client, I could acknowledge the fact that it was missing that one thing, or it was X over budget, or whatever it was. But most of the houses that I sold were from those searches, not from the search of exactly what they said they wanted. Right?
Well, I think you just gave a master class. Like, we got all kinds of ideas and strategies, and now we have a master class on this framework. And everything I've heard, it's value. You know, like, let's face it, if you can deliver an open house experience that dominates, and you can do things like dramatic, would you call it, dramatic demonstrations, that's value. If you have a database and help your agent have a database of buyers, that's value. If everybody listen to this, you're a mortgage coach. If you can present options and help vision cast 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, both show the cost of waiting and the gain of getting in the market, that's value. If you can be predictive, you know, one of the things we try hard here at Trust Engine is to be predictive with data, and not just predictive for refis. Like, every lender has credit signals to predict refis. Not every lender has credit signals that predict first-time home buyers, that predict move-up buyers, move-down buyers. And by the way, if you're a realtor watching this, we need to start leaning into families that have kids that are college aged or in their 20s, and help them come up with a plan to achieve homeownership for their kids. So there's a lot of education that you can bring to a family to, what's your plan for homeownership for your kids? You know, I'm an expert in house hacking. I have ideas and strategies to help you create generational wealth through real estate, help you as a family achieve financial freedom, help everybody in your household become a homeowner. Like, guys, these are all of these things that we talked about are value, 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 and it is unique value. Like, this is not something that every agent is going to be great at. This is not something every loan officer is. So, Keri, I know we're a little over time, and I want to respect your time, but I also want to just, in the spirit of how can a buyer agent not articulate unique value, execute, like, don't go into detail, but just riff real quick on call it the unique value strategies of a buyer agent. What are 2 or 3 of the most unique value propositions that you think buyer agents should be bringing to the market now that we're 6 days post-NAR? Just real quick, high level, and then we'll hopefully unpack those in a future interview.
Sure. I think having a process is the first thing, because if you want to be able to consistently talk about your value and have confidence, and you know what to expect every time you're meeting with a buyer, you're going to come across as more professional, and the buyer's going to feel more confident. And every single time you're going to review all of the data that's important for them to understand, to be educated and make the right decisions. So first, have a process. Second, you have to be able to go above and beyond what is standard. What is standard is you're going to work hard for them. You're going to be responsive. You're going to have prompt communication, like all of those things, right? And so I think off markets is the top way to provide additional value, because at the end of the day, they're hiring you to find a house. But the part that I just went into, a lot of agents are just letting the client come to them with houses. So another part of being valuable is telling them, you're going to get me immediately studying everything, and we're going to be in communication, and I'm going to make it easy for you to be exposed to houses that are exactly what you're looking for and save you a bunch of time. I think it sounds so simple, but it's very important that you approach it the right way. And I have one other comment about that. Don't set up the concierge. Like, some very, very successful agents do it this way. And Dave, do you know what that means? The
What's
concierge?
Sort of. I mean, I get the concept.
It's when and lenders, if you have real estate agents that are doing this, talk to them. It's when the agent looks at the listing before they push it to the client. And what it does is creates an environment where you can never go on vacation. You can never wake up and just decide to hang out with your kids before you look at listings, because the only way your client is getting notified about a property is you push it to them. So it's, in my mind, it's just about the people who are unwilling to do the work up front are the ones who have to do it that way, right? So if you just have a search that matches their criteria and you send it every time, you don't have that same risk of letting them down. And then the last thing, we offer guarantees. So as an example, if you buy a home with us, Dave, and you're unhappy, we'll sell it for free. If you commit to working with us and you're unhappy with our service, we're going to earn your business every single day. There's 100% cancellation guarantee. So part of the value that we provide is this peace of mind that if we tell you we're going to do something, we're going to deliver.
Love it. So I know we both got to jump on another call here in a minute. This has been incredible. I mean, every time I interview you, I feel like one of the all-time best interviews of a real estate leader. Can't thank you enough for how much you just pour in to this trust engine and mortgage coach community. And, you know, I can only imagine how lucky all the agents that you lead are, you know, to get you on a daily and regular basis. Any closing thoughts or for any mortgage or real estate professionals following us or following this, watch this, what's the best place to follow you? What's the best way for people to stay in your community? If you have any workshops
Sure.
or things that you're offering to the market, you know, how should we follow up with you?
Absolutely. So we do have a lot of courses that we offer on hyperfastagent.com. And then Instagram is a great place to stay in touch with me, and it's the Keri Shull. And the last thing I will say, if you're an agent who listened to this and you're like, man, I don't know how to run the scenarios. I don't know. You're talking about the data and the numbers. Find a lender that has access to Dave's products, because the mortgage coach will help you be able to easily articulate the data that's going to give your buyers confidence to jump off the fence, and they'll thank you for it.
Yeah, so any agents who've heard that, just ask your loan officer if they use Mortgage Coach or Trust Engine. We're not hard to find. You can Google us. You can go to trustengine.com. You can go to mortgagecoach.com. And really, not because I founded Mortgage Coach, but because truly a mortgage coach can bring more value to you and the families you serve than ever before. I mean, it's all about education. It's all about making complex concepts simple. It's all about helping people build wealth with real estate faster. And if they don't understand it, they can't do it. And if they're not clear, they're not going to make their best offer. You can't, like, optimizing someone's purchase power is not just about pre-qualifying them. It's about making people like, I could do this, you know, like if you don't know what if the seller is going to cover the buyer agent, then have your loan officer, like, column A is they cover it like most people do. Column B is, what if we raise the purchase price to cover it? Like, let's say they don't. Column C is, what if you had to adjust your down payment? And then column 4 is, hey, you've got to bring more cash into escrow. Like, you've got to make people clear and confident, or you're not going to maximize their purchase power. You're not going to win in multiple offer situations unless you're working with a lender that could do all those things. So if you have not followed the Mortgage Coach YouTube channel, follow it today, whether you're an agent or a real estate professional. If you're not following me at savageinsights.com, follow that today. And also there's a text group. Once or twice a week, I put out a text, what I think is the best content. I can tell you right now, Keri, like, I'm going to be telling everybody that follows me to watch Keri Shull and watch whatever we put the headline on that. They'll check it out. So guys, this is a wrap. Take care, everybody. And thank you so much, Keri. I can't wait for the next conversation.
Thank you.